He said, church, or Paul was writing to the church as it can be, as it should be. And I thought, that's got to be our focus moving forward. The church as it can be, as it should be. That's what Paul is talking about when he addresses the Ephesians. And so that's what we're going to look at. But we have to be willing to listen, don't we? We have to be willing to listen. The old adage is God gave us one mouth and two ears, which means we should listen twice as much as we speak. And what a difference it makes when we're having a conversation with somebody and they're really open to listening to us. Doesn't that make you feel good? When you're talking about something that's really close to your heart and you're sharing and you know that person is tuning in, it makes a difference, doesn't it? It's the same thing when we're looking at the Bible. If we have an open mind and an open attitude when we're reading the Bible, it makes a tremendous difference. That's what James was talking about. And I'm going to look a little bit again at the book of John, and we're going to see this contrasting open attitude, open mind, and a closed attitude and a closed mind. In John chapter 29, Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one who is sent. Now he's throwing that statement up very strategically, very deliberately. You see, Jesus has just done miracle after miracle, and he's been sharing about God and about the kingdom of God. He's been telling them about love and the commands of God. And the people right at this point in time are very keenly interested. But they're only interested to a certain point. And Jesus is fully aware of this. And so he goes on a little bit, and he's digging a little bit deeper. And he's touching people in a way that some of them aren't comfortable with. He declares this. He said, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Now he's getting really deep. He said, I can bring you satisfaction. My words can bring you satisfaction. In me, you can have satisfaction. And he also uses these words deliberately. These two words that for a Jewish person would be very, very important. He uses the words I am. I am. And when he uses that, they know what he's saying. And that's really getting close to home. And he goes on in verse 61. He says, aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? And then he goes on, because he's not going to let it go there. He goes on. Then what if you see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? Now, you know what he's saying right there. He's saying, what about when you see me go up to heaven? And this is really getting close to home for these people who are following him. He goes on, he says, the Spirit gives life. The flesh accounts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they're full of the Spirit and life. Yet, there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning which one of them did not believe and who would betray him. And he went on to say, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. Now again, think about these words for a second. So now you get people who are getting a little bit uncomfortable with what Jesus is saying. And then he says this, guess what? God hasn't drawn you to me. Now it's becoming personal. What are you saying? How dare you say something like that? You're saying to me that God can speak to you through you and not through me? Well, he is saying that. But they're not comfortable with it. And so it says in John, chapter 6 of John, from this time on, many disciples turned back and no longer followed. They couldn't stomach it. But I always have to go to verse 67, because that's a good reminder that there are two different attitudes. He turns to the 12 and he says, do you want to leave me too? And Simon Peter, who's the quiet one, he blurts it out. Or it says here, he answered him, Lord, to whom else shall we go? But you have the words of eternal life. See, there's the attitude. There's the attitude that is different. Chrysostom. Now I had to work on that name there. You might not know him, but he was a saint of Smyrna back in the early 1900s. And I like what he said. Listen to this. He said, people are nailed to the things of this life. Did you get the intensity of that? They're nailed to the things of this life. Many people, many of us are afraid to look beyond what we perceive to be the limits of our life. We set up this model, this idea in our mind, and we say, this is life, this is reality, and we don't feel comfortable moving past that. And so when something else comes along, well, we dismiss it. See, people read about Jesus, and they read the words in the Bible, and some people look at it and go, well, you know what, certain things I can accept because it fits within the context that I have developed of what this world is all about. And then the rest of it, no, I can't accept that. Because it goes beyond their idea of societal norms. They're nailed to their own concept of reality. They won't look past it. I was reading a little bit about Napoleon. Napoleon was a visionary. Whether you agree with what he did or not, it doesn't matter. He was a visionary. He was a leader. He could see things that other people couldn't see. He could see potential and possibility. And here's an example of the difference between Napoleon and many other people. Napoleon was walking with a friend through his palace. And it was in the evening, and they came to a window. And they were staring out the window. And Napoleon said to his friend, he said, you see those stars up there? And the stars were nothing but pinpoints in the sky, very dim. And his friend is looking and looking. He goes, no, I can't see anything. And Napoleon looked at him and said, that's the difference between you and me. That's the difference between you and me. See, Jesus was doing things that nobody else had ever done. He was healing the sick. He was, making the blind to see. He was providing food in miraculous ways. He was teaching profound truths about the kingdom of God and about love, God. And many people were all excited about these miracles. But when he started to go deeper, when he started to explain the truth about himself and about his relationship with God, and that he was the Son of God, they didn't want to go there. And they started to turn away because it went beyond their comfort zone. They weren't willing to see what God was making available to them. They were closing their mind. And there's so many people this day and age who are doing that, closing their mind and saying, it can't be true, it can't be right, you're wrong. I'd rather be on Jesus' side than on the side of everybody else who's saying you're wrong. If I'm going to pick a side, I'm picking this side here. Even if the majority is against me, I don't care. I'll stick with Jesus. See, the point is that Jesus was making is this: that we as a people are so intensely interested in only our physical and emotional satisfaction. The people were receiving from Jesus a lavish meal, a banquet, but they were only comfortable with what they wanted. They were saying to him, give us more wonders, give us more signs, give us more healings, give us more bread and fish. That's what we can stomach, that's what we can handle. Give us something that makes us feel comfortable. Don't put us outside of our comfort zone. But Jesus doesn't do that, does he? He takes us way outside of our comfort zone. But he tells us when he does this, don't worry, I'm with you. I'm with you all the way. And he'll take us way beyond societal norms. But he says to us, you're not alone. I am with you always. See, our society has become a very comfortable society. I'm not just talking about Canada. as many other countries, the first world countries. I love my brother-in-law's statement when we have a little problem. We had a problem with the snowmobile the other day, and we're getting frustrated, and he looks at me and he goes, first world problems. I go, yeah, all right, I get it. It's no big deal, really. But we've become very comfortable. And if you think back to Roman times, they had become comfortable as well, too. You see, the Roman society actually had a middle class. And the middle class was able to enjoy such things as good food, interest in exciting recreational activities, warm, comfortable beds and homes. They had become very luxurious. They used to feed on such things as, and I was reading about this, going, really? They would eat such things as, are you ready for this? Peacock brain. Seriously. Or nightingale tongue. We have pickled cheeks. And we feast on things like T-bone steak, prime rib, and pierogies. There's a similarity. There was a story told by Gaius Plinius. They called him Pliny. In case you're wondering who it is, just say Pliny. And he was an elder in the Roman state back in the early 2000s, or 100s or 200s. And he was telling a story. He writes a story about how at this Roman wedding, the woman was wearing a wedding dress and jewelry. And together the cost would have been over $1.5 million of our dollars. And that's what she wore. Doesn't that sound similar to the way things are today? He was saying the people had so much. Listen to this. They had so much that nothing made them happy anymore. And they were always trying the newest, the weirdest, the most exotic things to get a buzz, to get a feeling, a thrill, but nothing satisfied. And that's what Jesus is telling to us. This world has nothing to satisfy you. I am the bread of life. You will not be hungry. You will not be thirsty if you find in me your satisfaction. Long ago, the prophet Isaiah asked this question. He said, why do you spend your money for what isn't bread, and your labor for what does not satisfy? He's asking the same question centuries before that is a reality for us to think about today. And Paul stated this in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He said, but the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God. They are foolishness to him, nor can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Again, are we willing to allow God to give us the ability to tune in and see the things that we really need to see? What he's saying is that there's two kinds of hunger. There's a physical hunger that we can satisfy, and if you're hungry after the meeting, well, we have coffee and we have tea and we have all sorts of goodies available, and that will satisfy your hunger until you get home and eat that T-bone steak or prime rib or whatever it is you want to eat. But there's also a spiritual hunger which can only be satisfied in Jesus. Period. That's it. Bottom line. And everybody has it because we were created by God, and we were created by God to know Him. And He put that hunger in us. And the problem is that people look to satisfy that hunger in all sorts of ways, and they can't find it, because money can't buy you happiness. Warren Buffett, I was reading the other day a statement by Warren Buffett, and he said, I'm not going to leave my family too much. Just enough so that they aren't in want, but not enough to satisfy them for life, because it's not good for them. It's not good for them. Jesus' point in chapter 6, that all these followers were interested only in their physical satisfaction. And they wanted more, but they weren't willing to open up their mind and to really look at Jesus in a whole new light and say, okay, what are you teaching us, and what does this mean for me? He said, Jesus is the only one who can satisfy the human heart and soul. But we have to be willing to open up our minds and let him really speak to us. In verse 68 of John chapter 6, Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom else shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. We've come to believe and to know. Again, part of the problem that people have is, well, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I can't understand God. I don't understand what he's trying to convey to me. Let me ask you this question. Is there anybody here who can understand God completely? Is there anyone here who understands themselves completely? Do you understand yourself completely? Do you understand yourself so much that when you get angry, you know exactly what to do so that you can calm yourself down like that? Does anybody feel comfortable enough to say, hey, that's me? We're good. If we can't understand ourselves, now here's another one too. Dare I go there? Some of us have been married for a few years. Some of us have been married for a few decades. Some have been married for half a century. Do you understand your spouse completely? No? My heavens. Really? So let me look at this question again. Can we understand God, the creator of the universe, completely? Is it possible? It's kind of like saying to a 5-year-old, tell me all about neurology. Explain to me the brain and how it functions in its deepest capacity. It's impossible. We will never fully understand God. We will never fully understand God. But can we accept that reality and still move forward in our life and ask God to reveal himself? I can't understand the universe, but in the evening I like to look up at all the beautiful stars and acknowledge the fact that it's beautiful and it's beyond my capacity to understand and still love and appreciate it. God is beyond my capacity to understand, and I still love and appreciate him. A number of years ago, when I first started reading the Bible, I had so many questions. I found a good friend who was in the church that I was attending. He was a genuine person, and I went to him and I said, I've got some questions to ask you. And I started rolling these questions out one after the other. And he was very patient. He listened to me, and then he finally looked at me and he said, I can't answer all your questions, but I'm going to give you one suggestion. Are you willing to think about this? Okay. He said, I can't answer all of your questions, but I suggest that you take Jesus at his word and that you have faith and be patient. Now, I will honestly tell you at that time, that is not what I wanted to hear. I wanted answers to the questions. But now I can tell you 46 years later, I still have a lot of questions. And I still don't have all of the answers. But I am certain of this one thing. With all of my heart, I am certain that Jesus is the real thing. That Jesus is exactly who he claims to be. And that Jesus can be trusted with all my heart and all of my soul and my mind and my strength. He can be believed. And I've come to realize that I will not understand everything. And that's okay. You know, Paul put it this way here in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You know, the love chapter. I love going over that. But in verse 12, he said this. He said, now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I'm fully known. That's my reality. I can't know here and now. And when Paul uses this analogy, he's talking about a mirror. When we think of a mirror, we can look in the mirror and we can see all the finer details that we never wanted to see about ourselves. But when you looked in a mirror back centuries ago, you looked in a piece of polished metal. And you saw very dimly. Maybe you could see the part in your hair. And for some of us guys, maybe you could see that the part was disappearing or widening. But you saw very dimly. And that's what he's saying. We don't understand fully now, but we're going to understand, and we're going to fully understand one day. And then we go back to, let's go back to the words of James, where he says, therefore get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you. So it's all about our attitude, our willingness to be open. He says, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves, but do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. They will be blessed in what they do. So what we're talking about here is listen to what the Bible has to say. Listen to what God has to say, and to be willing to follow those instructions, to be willing to follow the moral and ethical laws that Jesus and the Bible provides for us. In Romans, Paul said that Christ is the culmination of the law. And then we saw how in Mark chapter 12, verse 20 to 30 to 31, how Jesus took the law and he summarized it all. And I love the way he summarized it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. That's the first one. And then second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he adds, there is no commandment greater than these. But here's the truth. When we make that decision, when we make that choice to follow the instructions of God, and I put it nicely, instructions, because guys, we know what instructions mean for us, right? I opened up something the other day I got from Amazon. I was really excited about it. I couldn't wait to use it. Put the instructions aside, with the box aside, hooked it all up. 3 weeks later, it's not working. I can't find the... Exactly. Now I'm lost. I don't know how to make this thing work. Instructions are very important to us. But we're not just talking about simple instructions. We're talking about laws, commands. When we're willing to follow the laws and commands given by God, it gives us freedom. We are free. Now that sounds like an oxymoron in a sense. How can I be free when I'm following the law? But we're talking about the laws that Jesus has given us. And here's a few statements here from some people in the past. Philo of Alexandria, he was a Jewish philosopher around the turn of the century. He said, all who are under the domination of their own anger or desires or any other passion, okay, so that's pretty broad, isn't it? We're all included in that. This is what he says, are altogether slaves. But all who live with the law are free. You hear that? Seneca, 4th century Stoic philosopher, he said, to obey God is freedom. You hear that? To obey God is freedom. Let me give you an example. If people in our society would just follow a few simple laws that have been given to us by God, we would be free. I'm going to give this example. So in the 10 Commandments, if people all agree, I will not kill, I will not steal, I will not covet, just these 3, we would all be freer, wouldn't we? You could go out in Central Park in the middle of the night, and you could walk safely, you could walk freely through Central Park in New York City in the middle of the night. You'd be free to do that, because you wouldn't have to think about somebody's out to get me, because everybody's agreed not to kill, not to steal, not to covet. You could leave your house door open. You're driving down the road. I know nobody does this. You're driving down the road. Oh, I left the door unlocked. Well, we better go back because somebody might break in and take all of my stuff. You be driving down the road, I left the door unlocked. Don't worry about it. You're free from worry because nobody's going to kill, nobody's going to steal, nobody's going to covet. You get the point? By following the laws of God, we are free. Jesus' word, the Bible, can be trusted. And we all benefit when we, with an open mind and a simple faith, read them and put them into practice. Let me share you a few more things. The instructions from James. Verse 5, he says, the man who looks intently into the perfect law. And in that he uses the word, in the Greek word, which we interpret look. And the Greek word literally means to stoop down and to gaze in. Like when Peter was running towards the tomb to see if Jesus was not there anymore. And they use the same word, and they describe it of him stooping down and gazing in. He's investigating. He is looking for himself to make sure that, oh, this is real. He said, you got to stoop down. You got to investigate. Check it out. Then James tells us to read it carefully. Pay attention to everything that we're reading. It's kind of like this. I like reading mystery novels. And I read them very carefully. It takes me a while to read a mystery novel. And I have so much pleasure finding out who did it before I get to the end of the book. You know what I mean? I got it all figured out because I've been reading everything carefully. I hate it when I get to the end of the book and I'm like, what? I missed a clue. I have to go back and find it. He says, read it carefully. And he says, remember the details. Remember the details. Now, I'm going to speak to only a few of you here because I know there's probably only one or two people who look at me and say, I can't remember anything word for word. Remember the details. Remember the important things. I have study books over the years, studying different topics, and I can open these books and I can find how I've underlined, highlighted, circled words, written notations beside it. I have an old Bible. And one of these days when I get to that particular box that it's in, as you know, we just moved a little while ago. And the thing about I learned about moving, Blair, is this. We label every box, and then we put them one on top of the other. Get the point? I have no idea what's in any one of these boxes. Next time I move, I hope it doesn't come for a long time, I'm going to label them all around. And I can't find the box with my little old Bible in it. And that little old Bible has been underlined and highlighted, and words have been circled, and I've written all over it. You see, that's what he's talking about. He said, remember the important details. And what I find is, when I read something and I rephrase it, it clicks in my mind. And I remember. Then he says, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Have you ever noticed one of the basic characteristics of young people is they ask questions? Isn't that true? You see, life is an experience for them. Life is a whole new experience, and they're asking all sorts of questions. I sat with this one young child, and in a matter of 5 minutes, he asked me 50 times, why? And on one hand, I'm so excited because he is interested in it. On the other hand, I'm going, oh my heavens. And I finally turned to him and I said the answer that nobody should ever say, because. It's the way it is. But here's the thing. If you want to stay young, don't stop asking questions. If you want to stay young, don't stop learning. Be excited about what you can learn. We as adults, we stop asking questions. Why is it that we stop? Here's a few thoughts around that. I was looking at, why do we stop asking questions? Here's a few thoughts. We assume we know enough of the main things, or enough of what we want to know, and so the rest of it, it's not important, and we stop asking questions. We're willing to dismiss other ideas as being unimportant, radical, whatever. But we don't want to ask questions. Or possibly we don't ask questions because we don't want other people to think that we don't know. Have you ever done that in a conversation? You're talking about something, oh yeah, really? Yes. I have no idea, is what you should say. But we don't want to say that because we're afraid. There is nothing wrong with coming up and somebody saying something, go, I have no idea what you're talking about. I am completely lost, and I would like you to explain that to me. And you would make them happy, and you would be bored for the next 15 minutes, but you would learn something. Stay young by asking questions. Albert Einstein stated this: the important thing is not to stop asking questions, because curiosity has its own reason for existing. We have a friend who sadly has been described as, and I'm very serious about this too, the most uninterested person. Did you hear that? The most uninterested person. They're not interested. Would you like to? No, it's okay, I don't. Would you like to? No, we're good. But what happened to our dear friend was that their mind started to go. Because they were completely uninterested in the world around them. And now their mind is very, very narrow. It's sad. Curiosity will open us up to depth of understanding, and it will increase our faith. And then, finally, some of you saying, okay, does he get there? I'm telling you, he gets there. James says, put your heart in it. In Psalm chapter 119, verse 11, we read it earlier on, it says, your word have I hidden in my heart, that I might not sin against you. Put your heart into reading the Bible. And when we do that, the true meaning will really penetrate. It will get into us. It's like a penetrating oil. You put it on, it seeps right in, it gets right into it, and it does its job. But we have to put our heart in. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1 says we must pay attention. We must pay the more careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. Reading the Bible with an open mind, with an open attitude, is so important. Acknowledging and recognizing that Jesus is real, that Jesus is the real thing. He's everything I need. And what he wants to teach me is always important, and I should be willing and open to learn. Here's a simple prayer that I share that we could have as we read the Bible. Lord, give us a hunger for truth. And Jesus, you alone are truth. Lord, give us a hunger for life. And Jesus alone, you are life. Lord, give us a hunger for love. And Jesus alone is a love that outlasts even death. And then this final word. This is actually a word for anybody who's in business. It comes from Joshua chapter 1, verse 8, where he says, keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Amen?